Hey everybody, it's me Alex, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Magic the Gathering 2019 Planeswalker deck known as Vivien. Now, included in this glorious box known as the Vivien box, you get a deck which you'll see a blurry like sensation right here. You get a deck box that's customized to have her face on there because she's the main character, the theme of the deck. Then you get a mini tutorial on how to play. It gives you the bare minimum, and also there are several rules that occur in play with these abilities that they don't cover. And then followed by a really brief instructions on how to play this deck. And the way you play it is by summoning big creatures. It's the most straightforward deck you can possibly get, so I wouldn't recommend even bothering reading that. Now, the way that the cards are set up, at least diversified with their card abilities and what they got, is they have about 20 cards that are below the 3 mana curve threshold, and about, let's see here, we got 12 creatures that are below 3 mana, that are 3 mana costs or below, and then followed by 13 cards, well, 14 cards technically, that are 4 mana and above, the highest being 7 mana, such as the Palaka Worm, costing 7 mana for a pretty good ability, being able to gain life and trample and all that stuff. Now, overall, there are about 6 ways to handle creature cards, depending on what they are exactly. So example, this one, Plummet for 2 mana, destroy a creature with flying. You got Rabid Bite, which is used if you have a big monster. You can take out another opponent's big monster. And then followed by Meteor Golems, which are about 7 mana cost. So they're pretty expensive, but you can destroy anything you want on the field with the mana golems. There's only about 5 monsters that are above 4 power naturally. And the reason why that becomes a big deal is you'll have things like Colossal Majesty for 3 mana as an enchantment. Is that if you have a card with 4 power or more at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to draw an extra card. So there are several cards in this deck that, such as Rabbit Bite, that rely on your character on you having high-powered creatures. So like I said, 20 cards like that. There's 23 lands altogether. There's 3 ways to handle artifacts and enchantments. One of them being the Reclamation Sage. It's a 2/1 when it comes into play. Destroy an artifact or enchantment for 3 mana. This is the cheapest way you're going to have an ability to deal with that threat. Otherwise, you have to wait for Meteor Golems that cost 7. All in all together, there's not many ways you actually can play green as intended with this deck. The majority of staples when it comes to green are the ability to, like, let's say, play Druid of the Cowl and tap it for extra mana, things like that. There's only 2 of them in this deck. And there's only 2 Elven Rejuvenators, where when it comes into play, you get to put a land onto the field tap if the next 5 cards in your deck have a land. If they don't, you just put the rest of them on the bottom of your deck in any order. So you might end up looking at the next 5 cards and being very, filled with regret that it's going to be of any use to you. There are still several strong monsters in the deck. For example, there's the exclusive to the starter deck, the Aggressive Mammoth, that costs 6 mana, is an 8/8 with trample, and makes it to where all your monsters get trample. There's also the Colossal Dreadmaw, and even though it's a common, it costs 6 mana and it's a 6/6 with trample. So there's big stuff here. You can actually play this deck without any modifications whatsoever, and you will mostly do fine. But like I was saying, just a lot of the staples are missing. When there's only 5 monsters in your deck, in this deck right here, that are of actual use, it makes it much more difficult to do a lot with it. The mid game, they mostly are successful. At least this deck is mostly successful between turns 5 through 8, and then After that, you just gotta get lucky because there's 5 ways to draw cards in this deck. One of them is the Colossal Majesty. The other is the Elvish Rejuvenator, which I wouldn't technically call drawing because you're drawing a land, so you're thinning your deck at that point. And then followed by the last one is the Scala Wolf. There's 2 copies of the Scala Wolf in this deck where you look at the top 5 cards of your library and you take a green card from there and put it in your hand. And it costs 5 mana, so the likelihood you're playing it is not early on, making it not really a reliable means to do it. But yeah, overall, there's quite a few useful cards. There's some Titanic Growth. There's 2 copies of it in the deck, which is very useful for trying to trick players into blocking creatures that would die, things like that. Then you give them a quick buff, or if they take like a Thunderbolt or something like that. So you have means to defend yourself, but a lot of the times, because of the power to toughness ratio, it takes a good 5 to 6 turns before you really start getting anything useful on the field. And when you do, you have no real means to gain life back. Like as an example here, the Palaka Worm is the only creature, the only means that you can get life back in your deck, back in your life pool. So if you're dealing with anybody that does burn, anybody who casts spells that reduce your life, you are at the mercy of how effective they are at making you lose life. So by itself, it would need modifications, but against other starter decks, this is a very good starter deck. The exclusive Planeswalker to it is Vivien of the Arcbow. She costs 6 mana to be on the field, 5 loyalty counters, and makes it to where one of her abilities is she gets 2 loyalty counters, and one of your creatures gets +2/+2. -3. Her -3 ability is she gets to make one of your creatures target another creature to do direct damage to it. And then the 9th one that costs -9 loyalty is all creatures you control get +4/+4 and trample. So it's a souped up version of Overgrowth. No, not Overgrowth. Sorry. I forgot the exact name of the trample spell. But it's a very famous card. So there's a lot of it's a solid Planeswalker, but again, you have to rely on the Planeswalker not dying right away. And overall, like I said, it's a very solid deck. It doesn't have many means to draw its way out of a problem, so it's a little too luck dependent, especially because of the consistency of high-powered monsters for you to play with. But out of all the starter decks, it is pretty much the best deck that you're going to get. And if you're going to do starter deck v starter deck, I would recommend picking this up. And if you wanted to make modifications to it, I would do a few things like remove the Urzine Champions, because even though they're somewhat useful, they cost 6 mana to give them +3/+3. And if you're taking that long to beat your opponent, there's a big problem. So just a few, the Thornhide Wolves cost 5 mana, and they're a 4/5 plane. I'd get rid of that. But overall, there's maybe 6-7 cards that are not fully useful because they're just too expensive for what they're capable of doing. It's a pretty good deck all around. I would recommend this one, and hopefully you learn something about the deck to see if it's worth picking up. Bye-bye.